film, we will have a few speakers who will describe ways that the environmental movement is being harmed by military action, and also then solutions to it, such as the Green New Deal. So our first speaker is going to be Will Alexson, and Will is with Veterans for Peace, and Will is so he's the leader of the Climate Committee. So he is figuring out how to. So this is Will. Will is with Veterans for Peace, and he will speak for a few minutes about their climate crisis and militarism campaign, nationally and locally. Thank you, Will. Take it away.
All right. Thanks for asking me to participate this evening. I appreciate that on behalf of Veterans for Peace. I really liked our film's makers' credentials. They kind of made me give thought about what he was talking about. He's written 11 books, produced and directed more than 30 films. His feature documentary. Hello?
Be sure to mute yourself, everyone.
Oh, that was somebody else. Okay. His feature documentaries include Dear President Obama, Antarctica on the Edge, After the Spill, and Ghost Fleet. He's a longtime contributor to magazines from New York Times and Atlantic and Outside.
Recording in progress.
And Rolling Stone. And he's a heavy contributor to National Geographic, and he's an adventurer. And that's the kind of guy I would like to hang out with around the issue we're talking about today. And it's, this thing kind of, you mentioned that it's a Earth Day, revolving around Earth Day. And I remember that there was a lot of talk about Earth Day in 1970. I was in Vietnam in 1970, so I didn't get to participate much. But over the years, Earth Day has kind of fallen to the wayside. Not too many people even know about Earth Day anymore. A couple of us tried to make waves at the Seattle Center last year and during Earth Day, and people were asking us, well, what's Earth Day? Well, Earth Day is pretty important. Who knows? Maybe we're going to see a resurgence of Earth Day. The film, I was struck several ways about the film, and I saw a lot of people wanting to ask Biden to walk the talk, and some of the groups I hang around with, a lot of what we hear is walking the talk. If you're going to say something, you're going to make some promises, then the thing you should do is you should follow up on that. You should be true to your words, and otherwise, you're going to get, people are going to start wondering if you're ever going to tell the truth. And unfortunately for us, we're seeing that in this film where so much of the stuff that he talked about, he hasn't done. He did a little bit, of course, to get us all, happy from the early days. But then later on, of course, he started veering off from the topic. And, another thing that I saw a lot in the movie was the amount of grassroots efforts, and I was happy to see that. I really was struck with how many people across the country are getting involved in the cities. And that's been happening for a long time, I'm sure. We don't see this always when we're just doing our regular day's work, but to see these small groups getting together in Port Arthur, in Pennsylvania and Texas, and Louisiana, out on the plains again, to bring this to the forefront really made a point with me. I like the wins that were talked about. I like some of the things that were happening. The Dakota Access Pipeline, it was a huge deal to get that shut down. Of course, Trump wanted to redo that, and what a fiasco. But the people did get that shut down. It goes to show that we can make things happen. I was glad to see that. The down part about it was the amount of human misery that's created by our lack of interest in helping others as far as the climate crisis goes. And that really struck me hard. It kind of really starts to get my blood boiling a little bit when we hear about the cancers and the other things that go on as a result of our efforts to make rich people richer, I suppose, is really what the bottom line is. But Um, so those are some of the things that I kind of reacted to when I was watching it. And I'll tell you a little bit about Veterans for Peace. I'm a member of Veterans for Peace since 2005, Vietnam conflict veteran. I was on the ground there from August of 1969 to October of 1970. And the Veterans for Peace is a global organization of military veterans and allies who collective efforts are to build a culture of peace by using our experience and lifting our voices. We inform the public of the true causes of war and the enormous costs of wars with an obligation to heal the wounds of war. Our network is comprised of 140 chapters, which include educating the public, advocating for a dismantling of the war economy, providing services that assist veterans and victims of war, and most significantly working to end all wars. The Climate Crisis and Militarism Project is part of a worldwide movement to end the climate crisis and promote climate, environmental, racial, and economic justice. The CCPMP focuses on how U.S. militarism, the single largest institutional source of greenhouse gases on the planet, fuels the climate crisis. And it falls, this climate crisis issue falls right in with the movie, all the stuff that talks about. They didn't go down the movie didn't talk about what war does to the environment, but if you see some of the statistics about what we've been doing in Ukraine and that's happening in Gaza, it's just amazing how much stuff we're putting back in the air with just a brief year or two of warfare going on in those countries. The environmental, racial, and economic justice, we saw the neighborhoods that seem to be affected most by what we're doing with the climate, or the low income affected homes or affected people. And, they don't really have the wherewithal, apparently, to really make big waves, but they're trying. So Veterans for Peace, of course, is working with that. Our group, our Veterans for Peace, are mostly middle income guys that are working hard to do something. And, the thing about Earth Day is I think maybe we should ask President Biden if he knows about Earth Day. Maybe he's forgot about Earth Day. Maybe we need to have a letter writing campaign and just send it. If everybody could send him a letter. Hey, President Biden, what about Earth Day? What about your speech? Maybe if we all send him just a huge amount of information, he would react to that. Anyway, I think maybe it's time to re-energize Earth Day, and I hope that those of you that saw this movie as I did and want to react to it, I think we just need to continue to get out in the streets and do what we can to make waves and start reducing that carbon footprint. And that's about all I have for you today.
Thank you very much. And we will be moving on to Krista.
And Mary.
And Mary. I can only do one at a time. Do it as fast as I can. Where's Mary?
So Mary and I are going to talk about the intersection between climate change and U.S. militarism. I'm Krista, and I'm from the Seattle Anti-War Coalition, and I'm also in 350 Seattle. I think one of the biggest ways that the two intersect is all the money that the U.S. government spends on militarism and war, and that's money that we could be spending on climate change instead. So we're going to talk a little bit about how much we spend on militarism and war, and we'll take a look at our taxes last year and how much was spent per person. And then we're going to talk a little bit about how does war contribute directly to climate change and climate damage and our ecology in general. And then if there's time, we have a list of actions to take. So taking a look at this chart, this is from 2022, and it's about how much does the U.S. spend on military spending compared to other countries. So on the left, in the light blue, the USA spent $877 billion. And then if you think about Biden's asking for another $100 billion, that would make that number go up even more. In the middle, the different colors, that's the next 10 countries in terms of size of military spending put together. They spent $850 billion. So still less. The U.S. spends more than the next 10 countries combined. And then on the right, $514 billion, that's the next 144 countries altogether. So we're way, way out of proportion. Even if we thought the military was a good thing, we spend way, way more than we need to be spending. Okay, so just taking an individual look now, that what does the average taxpayer pay for 2023? If you look at all the taxpayers across the country, the average taxpayer spent $5,109 on militarism and its support systems. And that includes $1,900 for the Pentagon, includes $125 on nuclear weapons, $110 for ICE, Customs and Border Patrol. And I looked at what it was for Boeing, $87 per person that our taxes to Boeing in Washington State here. And then I got this from the National Priorities Project. You can look that up. It's a website that takes a look at what we're spending. K-12 education, we spent only $346 per person. Energy efficiency and renewables, we spent only 11%. Refugee assistance, only $29. And Mary?
Thanks, Krista. Thanks, everybody. I've got a few slides to try to convey the intersection of U.S. militarism with the climate crisis. This first slide comes from, as many of you may know, the Brown University's Costs of War project. That's Costs of War, you can see it at the top.org. And they have worked hard because the military doesn't keep track or doesn't report its own emissions. So the Brown University project, works with the data that is available and came up with this summary. 1.2 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases the U.S. military is responsible for, and I believe that was between the period of 2001 and 2019. Some period like that, not for just, in other words, not for just 1 year. The U.S. Air Force is particularly consumes an especially high amount because it's the planes, as everybody knows, they run on gallons per mile of travel rather than, say, in our cars, miles per gallon. They're hugely fuel hungry. There's some figures here in the slide, as you can see, about how many cars could be powered by comparatively. But one thing I want to say is that many of us have been hearing that the U.S. military is the world's biggest consumer of fossil fuels and the world's biggest emitter of carbon. It's actually not quite that. That's not corrected on this site, which is that it's the world's biggest institutional consumer of fossil fuels and the world's biggest institutional emitter of carbon gases, so greenhouse gases. So it's something like number 47 or so in the number out of 200 countries. If the U.S. military were a country, it would be number 47 in that it emits more greenhouse gases than about 150 other countries in the world, which is astonishing. But not if you consider that we have somewhere between 750 and 1,000 military installations of some sort of bases and installations in 80 countries around the world. 2/3 of the fossil fuels that are burned by the U.S. military are burned carrying the remaining 1/3 to where it's going to be used in battle or in war. That's how fuel hungry it is, the U.S. military. So I think we'll move on to the next slide, Krista. Thanks.
Okay.
The next slide shows, I tried to do the math too, so you can see, this is 1990 to 2019, the total amount in the U.S. that various sectors are responsible for, the total amount of metric tons of greenhouse gases. You can see, as we all know, transportation is one of the biggest ones. Right after that, electricity generation. Those are our two biggest emitters in our country. U.S. military, if I did the math right, is equivalent to about the total agricultural sector. That's how much emissions the U.S. military is responsible for. Around that amount, or a little bit less than the last two, which are residential and residential and commercial greenhouse gas emissions in our country. So it's a significant emitter of greenhouse gases, but that in our view is not the only problem with the U.S. military. And I think for that, Krista, we'll go to the next slide. The U.S. military is as I mentioned, a global occupier in the form of military installations and bases. It's a dominating power around the world, as we all know. It works to secure supply chains and keep other powerful nations from those supply chains. The whole reason the U.S. military, the whole reason for imperialism in the 1800s, according to what I learned from Christine Allen recently, it was to secure the best coal in the world. And we're still operating in that mode. We are dominating the world in order to secure fossil fuels, and in addition to that, to guarantee a supply chain for our empire and not for others. War is also ecocide, and this was touched upon by, I think, Will. I think you mentioned this. It's a good slogan for people to think of and remember if you're not already familiar with it, in that not just war, but militarism itself poisons water. An example of that is Red Hill, Hawaii. Just a year ago or so, the old aging fuel tanks were leaking and poisoning the drinking water. It destroys habitat. And for example, forests and trees. This picture, as you can see, is from Afghanistan. We think of Afghanistan, to whatever extent we can imagine the land and water and air of Afghanistan. We think of it as an arid country, but actually it used to have considerable forests, both in the east and the west. The Afghani people themselves, wood has been a primary source of heat and fuel. Some of the deforestation, in other words, comes from the people chopping down trees, but more than that, it's the effect of war in Afghanistan. And nuances of that include things like farmers who are afraid that their fields have been mined will go and cut down other trees in order to start a new farm field. So that's just like one of the nuanced repercussions of war in a country and what it does to forests. And then, of course, everybody understands, if not before Ukraine, and if not before Venezuela, that the effect of poverty and the effect of war on people. People don't love to leave where they come from. People leave, they become immigrants because they feel they have no other recourse. And war is a great displacer of people. Those are just some of the ways in which war is ecocide. Destruction of ecologies that's very hard to rebuild over time. Next slide, Krista. And this is the last slide I wanted to share with you all tonight. Many of us in Washington, myself included, maybe not you all, but me, before I started doing this research just a few years ago, I did not understand how militarized, especially with nuclear weapons, the nuclear weapons industry, our own state of Washington is. This map, I'm not going to go into it. It's available. You can email Krista and me at Seattle Anti-War Coalition, Seattle Anti-War Coalition at gmail.com, or just Seattle Anti-War at gmail.com, either one, and we'll supply you with these slides, including this map. But I wanted to point out, for example, that Manchester Fuel Depot is just something like 6 miles from Alki Beach in Seattle, right across the Sound. It's got aging fuel tanks just like the ones, same era as Red Hill, Hawaii. It's known as the Pentagon's gas station because it holds so much fuel. And then, of course, everybody here probably also is very aware of the 8 Trident submarines, nuclear weapons armed submarines. We have 8 out of the states, 8 out of the country's 14 Trident nuclear submarines. Not nuclear powered, nuclear armed. And their destructive capacity is absolutely horrifying. So this is just the beginning of this, what this map, what kind of information. This map was created by an intern at Washington Against Nuclear Weapons, another great site for people to learn more about. And that's I'll put the website address in the chat. So it's terribly depressing, but the next slide is going to be, I believe the next slide is some of the steps that people in this event tonight, thank you to Beth and Ann and the organizers of this event tonight, some of the steps that we can take together to try to shift the paradigm, which is absolutely what needs to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. And before I move on to the next statement, I want to repeat that these 7 actions, you're going to put them in the chat box. Am I right? So people can save their chat box. They will also send them to us, so we will try to get them on our Social Climate Action website and put a link in our next newsletter. Because when we do our monthly newsletters, we talk of the last movie that we showed. So thank you so much, Krista and Mary. And so our next speaker is going to transition from, these are the things where we could take money from, and the question is where we want the money to go to. So in a minute, I'm going to be adding Dick to this. If I can find him. I'm going to, and then I'll be removing them. Add to pin. And so, did I add Dick? No.
I'm here.
Yeah, I'm trying to pin you so that you're bigger. Okay, there you are. So I'm going to take, so Dick is going to talk about the Green New Deal. So Dick, take it away. And then at the end, after Dick, we're going to take questions for everybody. Thank you.
Yeah, well, the Green New Deal started off real strong about 5-6 years ago. But just like with this Biden film, it's running into trouble. But one of the things I concluded from that film that we need to say is that the United States itself is a petrostate. What that means is when push comes to shove, fossil fuels talk. And that's also true when we look at the Green New Deal, for example. There were 2 major bills that have already been enacted to implement the Green New Deal. There's the bipartisan infrastructure law, I think that was 2021 maybe. And then there was, the next year after that, the Inflation Reduction Act. Neither of them mentioned the Green New Deal itself because the right wing has demonized that phrase. And so they have to reword everything. And right now, the same thing is happening. There are 3 new bills, major bills, that come along with the Green New Deal. Green New Deal for schools, for healthcare, and for housing. that look at those three sectors and say, how can we make those three sectors more green and support that? But again, when those are passed, they won't be passed as Green New Deal bills. They'll be worked into something else. But if you look at the first two, there's been a lot, this infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, they're really big things. But they quote things like $1 trillion over 10 years or something. But when you actually break down the money coming out each year, it's about, for the infrastructure bill, it's like $550 billion a year. For the I think that's for the Inflation Reduction. Which are, no, I don't care which one it is. But anyway, if you take the two together, it's about it's about $90 billion a year is being spent on the Green New Deal right now in existing bills. And if you look at the numbers we just saw for the U.S. military, there was like 877. It's about $900 billion. There's no other magnitude. So what we're spending right now on the Green New Deal, on renewable energy, on everything, is about 1/10 of what we're spending on the military. And it's worse than that. Because the actual amount being spent now is not up to what was projected. There've been lots of delays, supply line change, inflation. So we're not seeing all that infrastructure money, all that Inflation Reduction money to go into renewable energy, electric chargers, all kinds of new renewable power facilities, wind, solar, everything. Some of that's coming along, but it seems kind of anemic compared to what was promised. And more of it will eventually come. But even if it's full scale, we're just a tiny fraction of what the military is doing. And I think that needs to be a lesson. If we want to stop what's going on in Louisiana down there, if we even stop just a small fraction of that and put it into the Green New Deal kinds of things, that will be a really big thing. There's so much money going into those kinds of things down there. But the Ukraine war was mentioned, and there was the talk about the Louisiana, that area, all the East Coast area, these big pipelines for natural gas, the rail cars for natural gas, the ships for natural gas. Biden made these promises. One of the big reasons he broke those promises was because of the Ukraine war. And the Ukraine war was something that could have been prevented if we wanted to. Russia was basically provoked by U.S. and NATO policy, and we just ignored their bottom line. Whose bottom line was he didn't want NATO on his doorstep. And even Zelensky was willing to go along with that until the U.S. insisted on a war solution. And the war solution meant that Russia cut off natural gas to Germany. Without natural gas, that had a drastic effect on the German economy. How do we make up that? Well, we export our natural gas to Germany through all these new facilities in Louisiana and the pipelines and the LNG facilities, the rail cars. That's one of the major reasons this has happened. War is actually forcing us away from a renewable economy right now.
So anything, I think now we'll move on to other people being able to speak. So I'm going to go back to, let's go all to gallery view. And if you have a comment, raise your hand. The virtual hand, everybody knows how to do that. And then I'll call on people in order. And you can also put things in the chat box. So please get ready to raise your hand or put things in the chat box. Thank you, Dick, and all our panelists. I will be unpinning you as soon as I figure out. So we should be able to see everyone now. Is everybody on gallery view? So get on gallery view. I see Don Smith has his hand up. So Don, you're our first questioner or comment. Go right ahead.
Yeah, thank you for doing this webinar. I try to reach out to other Democrats, mainstream Democrats, and they think, they read what I say about the war in Ukraine, and they think that I'm like a Putin apologist or, a conspiracy theorist or something. So we have a lot of work to do to educate people about what's going on. So I know there are a lot of there. We have a good number of anti-war activists in the Seattle area, in the Washington State and Seattle area, and I always hope that they could, get together and get our message out, and by writing the op-ed for the Seattle Times, or through, maybe through a Democratic Party, or through some other publications. Next door you can actually get stuff out. I've had I posted an article about Adam Smith's town hall being disrupted by pro-Palestinian protesters, and it got 7,000 views in the first 2 days. And some other of my next door posts have actually gotten a lot of views. So if you can make a local component to your article, then it's actually appropriate for next door, and that's a great way to get publicity if you can manage. Of course, there are a lot of people who fight back. There's a lot of crazy comments, but you can still get your message out somewhere. So anyway, thanks for doing this.
Thank you, John. All right. Does anybody else have a comment? Or Anne, is there anybody in the chat that has a question or comment? I think Mona Lee, you told me you would want to make a statement about Ground Zero and nuclear weapons and what people can do. And be sure to unmute yourself.
Well, I didn't remember that what did I say I was going to talk about? I'm a member of Ground Zero Center for Nonviolent Action in Washington Against Nuclear Weapons Coalition, and we're having this week Tax Day to Earth Day. There's events happening all over the state in every congressional district. We're meeting, having rallies near the congressional offices. There was one down at the federal building by the senator's offices, and so the idea is to say that we want our money that's going over half your federal budget is going to the military. Did you realize that actually it's over half your federal the federal budget is going to the military? We want this money spent on saving the planet, doing good things for people, education, healthcare, things like that. So that's the whole purpose of this week, Tax Day to Earth Day, from April 15th to the 22nd. And so there's a website that you can go to, look on Washington's Nuclear Weapons Coalition, and there's a list of events that you can look into attending, depending upon what part of the state that you live in. I presume everyone on here on this call is from probably the Seattle area, but if you're from another area, there's something happening in all the congressional districts. So is that what you want me to talk about?
Sure, thank you.
Yeah.
So does anybody else have any announcements of actions happening for Earth Day? That would be
Beth, there were no questions, but there are lots of information about things that people can do. So if Krista or if Mary want to talk about some of those direct action opportunities, that would be great.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, we're trying to post some of them in the chat. And let me just take a look at what the list is. Come on, let me share that out again. So the first one is something that came up from Tax Day to Earth Day. A way to email your federal electeds. The letter's already written, but you can change it. All about moving our tax money to helping out the climate and environmental issues. Another thing you could do is become a war tax resistor. I was just hearing that trainings for learning how to become a war tax resistor are on the increase. They used to do 3 trainings a year, this one organization, and with about a dozen people each, and now they're training every week, 100 to 200 people. So people are getting more interested in doing that. You could join the Seattle Anti-War Coalition. We posted about that a couple times in the chat. Skipping down to number 6, you could join the 350 Seattle Anti-War Climate Collective. And you can either contact Mary at the address that we put in the chat, or you can go through 350 Seattle for that. Direct action, we strongly recommend that. People have been working for years and trying to get our governments to address climate change, and it's not working out so well. So definitely encourage getting involved directly. Work with Palestinian organizations or Jewish Voices for Peace on 4 issues. Work with 350 Seattle for the Sunrise Movement, climate issues. The next campaign for Stop the Money Pipeline, this is addressing the flow of money that keeps fossil fuels going. They have a summer campaign coming up, starts April 22nd through 25th in New York City. They're having a bunch of rallies and marches addressing Citibank. And they'll be going off some of them. But that's the beginning of it, so get involved with Stop the Money Pipeline. At number 7 is sign the Costco Clean Up Your Credit Card petition. And so that's about Costco's credit card is through Citibank, and Citibank is one of the largest funders, the second largest funder of fossil fuel projects. It's an effort to get them to stop that.
Thank you, Krista. And that will be in the chat, as we said.
Yeah, we're trying to post all the actual links in the chat. But if you have any questions or something's missing, please just email us.
Yeah, I have a suggestion too for action, Beth.
Yes.
On the Green New Deal, I had to pick out one thing right now. One of the new bills is called the Green New Deal for housing, for public housing. It's sponsored by Bernie Sanders. It's Senate Bill 1218. And housing, we have a real housing crisis because it's so expensive here. This bill wouldn't doesn't sponsor a huge new public program, but what it does is it will look at existing public housing and sponsor retrofits to make that housing more energy efficient, more green, clean water, everything, and so it makes sure that the public housing we have or is going to be built will be much more green. So that will take care of one of those key expenses. It won't be as full, but it's a partial solution. Everything like we need green transit, for example. We need more federal funding, and I think that's another bill that would help make more electrical buses and that kind of thing. So we need to look at particular things like housing and schools. Make the schools as an act for school, Green New Deal for schools that would make schools more energy efficient themselves, teaching about climate and whatnot. So there are Green New Deal things we can do, but I would recommend in our area start with the housing. Support green housing in this area.
Very good. That means we can write to our 2 senators. We can write to whoever your representative is. And at this point, Pramila Jayapal has endorsed all of the Green New Deal bills.
Right.
And is endorsing some of them. Today, some of us met with Representative Marilyn Strickland from the 10th Congressional District. And she, like the other representatives, hasn't signed any Green New Deal bills yet, and in part because they haven't even heard about them or been asked to sign them. So
yeah, we can raise the profile. Most people don't even know about these bills.
Right.
But like the Bernie Sanders bills actually started in 2021, and he's trying to build support year by year. But all these other things kind of swamped the wars and all that kind of thing.
So if you're interested in passing the Green New Deals, there's a couple groups you can work with. One is 350 Seattle. In addition to having its local Green New Deal, it does have a federal policy group that is prioritizing lobbying the Congress members and senators on the Green New Deal.
And Sunrise supports many of these Green New Deal bills, right. But we need to build momentum.
Right. Now, Don, is your hand still up?
No, I raised it again.
Okay. Oh, okay. You want it again? Go ahead then.
Yeah, I want to say something. So, I tried to set up a meeting with Representative Jayapal. I think some of you here might have been involved in it. Maybe Beth, you were. And we met with her aide to talk about what happened in Ukraine. And her aide was sort of hostile. Said, "Well, Representative Jayapal has promised the local Ukrainian community that she has their back and she's going to, completely fund the war in Ukraine. Now, I was able to set up meetings with Adam Smith, with Medea Benjamin, with Jeffrey Sachs, with people from Quincy Institute, several people from Quincy Institute. But I can't set up a meeting with Representative Jayapal, which is crazy. And there was some of her constituents. So if any of your constituents can do that, we should set one up. She should meet with peace activists. She's the head of the Progressive Caucus. It's very strange she doesn't meet with peace activists, or maybe she meets with other ones. So, but anyway, that was what I wanted to do. And then I'm putting in local chat. On tax day, there was a protest at Adam Smith's office, and I wrote an article about that summarizes it. And I have some photos. If someone else has more photos about that, please send, or more comments you want to add to that, please send. Because
we have a video of the whole event.
Say it again?
We have a movie of the whole event.
Okay, I could link to that. If you can point me to that, I'll put my email address. I mean, I don't know. There weren't that many people there, so I sort of have to spin it to make it look like it was more,
Well, we had a good turnout. We had about 25 people altogether, 25, 30 people.
Okay,
and that was much more than we expected.
Yeah, I said 2 dozen in this article. So anyway, if you have better photos, I have a couple photos there. Anyway, I want to put it on next door. And I said, with the local, say, at Adam Smith's office in Renton, and I'll spice it up, and, I might get, have a lot of anti-war messages in here about the cost that we're spending for it. So it's I might be able to reach, another 7,000 people on next door if with something like this. So again, this is on my website there, and if I extend it, and frame it well, you might be able to get our message out to like 7,000 people on next door about the cost of war. So this is what my point is.
And there's going to be an article in the Renton Reporter early next week about that event in Renton.
I mentioned in my piece that there was a report. There was a journalist from the Renton Reporter. It was also somebody from Turning Point USA. He was, they're probably hoping there was violence or something, so that they could.
No, Joshua Solar Lozano. He's just very. Oh, there was another guy. No, I wasn't talking about him. I was talking about the Renton Reporter, Joshua Solorzano. He was there to get us.
Yeah, I mentioned there were 2 of them. Yeah, I say that. I know there were 2 of them. One from the Renton Reporter. I spoke to him a little, and then the other one from Turning Point USA, which is a right wing.
Yeah, I didn't talk to him.
Okay, we made Anne is patiently waiting, so let's not. Maybe you 2 can talk about it after the meeting. Anne, go ahead.
Just very quickly, I just wanted to say that if anybody was inspired by the Dear President Biden theme and wants to do their own Dear President Biden video, we do have someone who volunteered to kind of string those together, and we can send it off to the White House, and we can put it on our website. So,
and also, if you want to send a message to President Biden, the Sunrise Seattle group is having a teach-in at the Federal Building tomorrow, Friday, at 4 p.m. And everyone's invited. You don't have to be a Sunrise member. And they're specifically asking Senator Patty Murray to ask President Biden to declare a climate emergency. So it's very relevant to this bill. The climate emergency has been a resolution in Congress for several years, but now Sunrise has chosen it for their major issue at this point. So that's tomorrow at 4 p.m. That's part of the Earth Day activities. So anybody who hasn't spoken yet, we've got a lot of other people on here. Any questions, announcements, comments? Okay, I still see Don and Anne's hand up. Do you want to take them down? Okay. Anybody else? Well then, in closing words, Ann Miller and I want to thank you and let you know that Meaningful Movies shows movies every week. Next week, the following week, you can always go on to their website. For example, on Sunday the 28th, there's 2. One is Good Trouble about John Lewis, and one is The Letter about the Pope Francis and his statement about climate. So those are some follow-up movies. So we want you to keep watching Meaningful Movies, and we want you to keep joining these organizations that have been talked about, and If you have a movie suggestion, send it to us. If you have an action suggestion, send it to us. We meet once a month. We put a newsletter out once a month. You don't have to be a member living in South Seattle. You just have to care about South Seattle Climate Action Network or the meaningful movies. And Anne, do you want to say a few closing words too?
I just want to say thank you. You know, we just are so grateful for all of you for showing up and being part of an important conversation. So these are things that it's hard to hold, and we try and hold these conversations together. It's easier when we do it in the community. So thank you so much for being here.
And remember, the climate movement is growing, and the peace movement is growing from these tragedies. The natural disasters make the climate movement grow, and these wars, Ukraine and Gaza, make the peace movement larger than I've seen it since maybe when I was young, the anti-war movement, so the anti-Vietnam War movement. So let's keep at it. Let's keep talking to our friends and neighbors to get more people, to focus on our Congress, our president, the corporations, stop the money pipeline. So I'm really grateful to see all you, and hope that you'll encourage other people to watch this movie, Dear President Biden. So it could be something that you could show to another group. Okay, any last closing words? If not, it's still daylight. Can you believe it? It hasn't sunset yet, so you can still go outside and enjoy nature or dinner, whatever you want to do.
Thank you.
We'll see you in the next video. Thank you, everyone. Thank you
very much.
Thank you. We're very
Thank you all live. Yes.
Have a good evening. Take care.
Okay. Bye. I'll stay on to the last one. And if you want to stick around for 1 minute, that'd be fine. Any follow-up?
Thank you all. Hey, Larry.
Hey, Larry. Thanks for recommending the film. We should have mentioned that you had
this whole thing. So this is fun that we actually got it to happen.
Yeah, I would never have known about this film without you, Larry. See, that's
great. Well, thanks for putting all this together, and I think it's a great model. And I'll be looking for more films that would be useful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we really appreciate previewing them and learn a lot from them. Yeah. Getting other
Terrific.
Okay,
Bye.
are we done then? All right. I'll see you Monday, right, Van? For scamming.
Bye.
Bye-bye.